I don't even know me. Roll me like a blunt, cause I wanna go home. Roll me like a blunt, cause I wanna go home.
Wow, that was fucking terrible.
Brendan Urie, listen to our podcast.
Yeah, Brendan Urie, listen to our podcast.
Please
Okay.
Welcome to This Is Lit, a podcast where we drink and talk about our favorite books. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey.
So raise a glass and let's get started.
Liz, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking Tilia Cabernet Sauvignon.
Fancy.
It is...
You know how many days lost yet?
No, I don't. Darling. That is because it is a twist top.
So our hashtags are at this point.
Hashtag twist top.
Hashtag listen to our podcast.
It is from Argentina, and it is a 2016.
What was the other one that we came up with?
Hashtag listen to our podcast.
Hashtag listen to our podcast. There's another one.
Hashtag twist top.
Hashtag listen. No, that wasn't it.
It should be.
You're making shit up now.
I'm good at it, though. And then I write it down, and then you become an author.
I do?
Both of us.
I
I don't know. I haven't had it yet. It smells good. Bitch, are you drinking for my wife first? Then it means I'll probably like it.
You don't like it. I am drinking.
Ooh, that's quite lovely.
A
little bit of smoky, a little bit of spice.
I'm drinking
Black cherry. Very
Canyon Road or Canyon Moon?
good. Canyon Road.
Canyon Road.
Moscato.
White Moscato.
Well done.
2017. With notes of sweetness and sugar.
Ooh, red currant. And cashew fruit.
I don't even know what that is.
With aromas and notes of cedar and a long, structured finish.
Red wine is a scam.
Red wine is delicious.
Today we are discussing one of the most quintessential classic novels of the 20th century, The Great Gatsby.
I'm gonna get a lot of hate mail.
Hate mail?
Mm-hmm.
Do you not like it?
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan.
Not a fan.
Shit, fuck, what the fuck? I love The Great Gatsby.
Okay. So, The Great Gatsby starts with Nick Carraway.
Nick Carraway. He is just your average Joe, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first off, let's back up a little bit. The novel was written and published in 1925, right smack dab in the middle of the Roaring 20s, before the Great Depression hit and destroyed American frivolity, as it was known at the time.
And that's after the Volstead Act, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Which is otherwise known as Prohibition.
Prohibition. Fitzgerald wrote this book basically inspired by the parties he went to on Long Island during the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it expanded from there, and he talked with his publisher for several years about the book before he finally got a permutation that he was happy with and published it. It actually didn't do well, you know?
Yeah.
When it first came out, it got mixed reviews. It was sold poorly, and only like 20,000 copies or something. Fitzgerald actually died believing himself to be a failure in 1940. But during World War II, The Great Gatsby became a curriculum in most high schools. And then there were also stage and film adaptations, and now it's considered to be one of the greatest literary classics of all time.
Okay. To start off, can we all agree that forcing kids to read is something that is killing the enjoyment of reading?
Well, what do you want them to do? I mean, you have to have reading or literature classes in school.
Yeah, that's true.
What do you want them to do? Like, okay,
let's do this. Let's all read a book and then discuss it.
Here's the thing.
And drink. Oh,
here's
wait,
the thing.
We can't lower the drinking age. Never mind.
Required reading is problematic for several reasons, not least of which that it's very overwhelmingly white and male.
You think?
And the things that are considered classics leave out a large portion of their audience.
Yes.
However, I don't think our solution is to just not have kids read in school.
That's true. They do have to read.
It's a struggle because I remember being in school. I am a voracious reader. You know this.
Yes.
I love to read,
Well,
and I, unlike a lot of my peers
didn't mind
in school,
any required reading.
In school, I was the one who really enjoyed a lot of classic novels. I think I told you a few episodes ago that I was that one kid in class who loved Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
I really liked a lot of classic novels, but I remember specifically My Antonia, which.
But we have to understand that a lot of our audience members coming to this novel, the first time they've read it was required reading for high school. And that kind of zaps a lot of the enjoyment out of it.
I really liked this novel the first time I read it. And have done multiple rereads since then. One of my best friends, Jez. Hi, Jez. Listen to our podcast.
Hi, Jez. I've never met you, but you sound nice.
Adores The Great Gatsby. However, I know there are a lot of people that it's not for their taste.
And seeing one of my best friends, hi, Allie, hates The Great Gatsby.
Like, actively hates it.
Actively hates it.
Interesting. Well, let's actually get into the discussion of the novel, and we can discuss how we love or hate it or whatever. Starts in the summer of 1922 with Nick Carraway, who is a Yale graduate and a veteran.
Yes. I had the audiobook, and the audiobook that I had was narrated by Jake Gyllenhaal, who played Nick Carraway in the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Great Gatsby.
2013 movie?
Yes.
Nice. So he's a Midwesterner, but he moves to New York to take a job there and rents a small house on Long Island in West Egg. Which is not a real neighborhood. Those aren't real neighborhoods. They're fictional neighborhoods created by Fitzgerald for the purposes of the novel. In West Egg, he is living next door to the big, fancy mansion of J. Gatsby, a multimillionaire who always throws these big parties but never shows up at them.
Nope, never.
So, at the beginning of the novel, we are introduced to Nick, who knows Gatsby, as his neighbor who throws these big expensive parties.
Yes, but we kind of get to know Nick through his first visit to his cousin, Daisy Buchanan, who is married to Tom Buchanan and
lives on the other side of the bay on East Egg.
Yeah, and her friend Jordan, I don't remember her last name.
Jordan
something.
Yeah. I think that's Jordan Baker.
Jordan Baker, who is a tennis star. And
cynical golfer.
There is something that really strikes me about Daisy, because Daisy also has a little daughter who she has with Tom, which the moment we are introduced to Tom, I don't like him.
Tom's a bitch.
Tom is a bitch, and I don't care for him. He is the definition of toxic masculinity.
He not only has his beautiful wife and beautiful baby at his home in East Egg, he also has a mistress named Myrtle Wilson.
But we don't know that at the time.
No.
But it is brought up during lunch. And
he has a mistress. And Daisy is an interesting character to me because Daisy.
She says about her daughter when she grows up, I hope when she's like, "Oh, your child is a daughter," she cries.
She's a beautiful fool.
And I hope she's a fool, and I hope she's a beautiful fool because that is the easiest way for her to go through life.
So Daisy is kind of implied to be this character who plays the ditzy flapper girl stereotype, but she's really not a ditz. She knows what's going on, but she just distances herself emotionally from it so that she doesn't have to deal with the pain that comes with it. Is kind of the implication.
Yeah, pretty much.
Daisy kind of knows things about, like, for example, she knows that she doesn't love her husband. She knows her husband is having an affair.
Yeah.
But rather than dealing with those things, she just chooses to actively pretend to be a ditz and not know about them, because that's easier than dealing with her reality. So Daisy is presented as this person who is not willing
Nick
to...
does nothing to help them.
Nick is an interesting character. Nick is our narrator, and he's not a reliable narrator.
No,
by
definitely
any means.
no. Definitely not a reliable narrator.
He watches Daisy and Tom's relationship and doesn't really do anything about it.
No. And he
justifies his behavior because he's kind of thinking, it's not my business, I shouldn't be.
Yeah, and then the next part of the novel is Tom takes Nick to New York, and he stops off and is like, I want you to meet my girl.
To the Valley of Ashes.
Yes.
So this is one of my favorite things about this novel, is the visual presented by the different physical locations of the novel. So
the language of this novel is absolutely stunning, and I love it.
Yes, it really
love the language of this
novel. So you get East Egg and West Egg, which are both very upscale neighborhoods on either side of the bay, full of big houses, although the houses in West Egg are bigger than the ones on East Egg.
Yes.
Big, fancy houses full of well-off people. And then you have the Valley of Ashes. Valley of Ashes is the part of New York where it's almost a slum.
Yeah, almost.
It's almost a slum. It's described as being gray and dreary and overlooked by a billboard for a
doctor or optometrist.
An optometrist, and it's got a pair of eyes on the billboard.
It's kind of like the eyes on the billboard are the eyes of God.
Almost. Yeah.
I don't know how Fitzgerald felt about allegory, but that's kind of how I pictured it. These are the eyes of God.
A pair of big blue eyes on this billboard looking over this slum part of town while there are people living it up and having big parties at Gatsby's house in West Egg. The people in the Valley of Ashes are barely getting by. This is before the Great Depression happened, but these people
are having trouble.
Are already having trouble, already financially in dire straits, already not knowing what to do with themselves. And one of these people is Myrtle Wilson.
Yes. And she is married to
Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Wilson. But she is having an affair with Tom. Mm-hmm. And Tom has a special flat that he rents out for her. And he buys her a dog, and he does all this, and then they have a gathering of friends, and Nick witnesses Tom physically abusing Myrtle.
Yes, Myrtle mentions Daisy by name, and Tom hits her several times because he doesn't like her mentioning his wife, and breaks her nose.
Yeah, which
at
this
like
point,
absolutely bizarre party. It's like what? It's Myrtle and Tom and Nick and Jordan, and they're all at this flat in New York. Watching Tom beat the shit out of Myrtle, and kind of like uncomfortably like.
I think Nick states like after that's one of the few times in his life he's ever gotten drunk. Is after he saw Tom physically abuse Myrtle, and at that point, I'm in this book and I'm like, throw him in the river.
Yeah.
Throw Tom in the river.
Tom is the worst.
He is a cheater. He physically abuses the women in his life. He emotionally abuses Daisy.
Although it's implied that he physically abuses Daisy.
Yeah, I'm like, get rid of him. Tom is a piece of shit. There was a wonderful line that Scott Fitzgerald had when he was describing Tom. He's like, Tom reached his peak at 21, and then the rest of his life just bespoke of anticlimax.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing, of course. And I'm like, oh, I know people like that.
Yeah, it's those guys that peaked in high school as the school quarterback. Nothing after that was really worth much. And Tom is definitely one of those guys. He's angry, he's abusive, he's not happy with his marriage, he's not happy with who he is or what he's doing for work, and so he takes it out on the women in his life.
Yes.
And it's pretty nasty. So shortly after this party at Tom's Spot in New York, Nick receives his first invite to a Gatsby party.
Which is a big deal. There's cars that come up the drive all the time, and it's a big deal. And he's like, I knew no one there. He'd sit and talk to people, and he is sitting talking to this one gentleman, and they are talking about the infantries they were in during the Great War.
World War I, that is.
Yes. And someone mentioned, and he says, well, I feel awkward because I have not met the host of the party yet, which is common etiquette at the time. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry, old sport, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jay Gatsby.
Gatsby is a very interesting character.
He is. Gatsby, I think, is definitely the most interesting character of the novel, and I think that's because Nick's a little taken with him.
You know, I've read several articles about Nick Carraway and about the.
I think Nick's a little in love with him.
Yeah. I've read several.
It doesn't have to be romantic love, but just a little in love with him.
No, I would go with romantic love. There is a lot of discussion online about how Nick Carraway is a queer character and he is in love with Gatsby. He's dating Jordan, and she's a very, very butch woman. She's a golfer.
Yeah.
And she isn't really that interested in Nick. Really, they kind of just have this
they have this odd kind of courtship going on, but
Mhm.
it feels like neither one of them is really invested. And it's kind of obvious that Nick Carraway is more invested with his friendship with Gatsby than he is with his romance with Jordan.
Right. I mean, like, literally, there are points in the novel where Nick is standing in Gatsby's bedroom while Gatsby's sitting in bed in nothing but his underwear reading the paper, talking to him. And there's definitely an element of queerness to it. Like, literally, there's a scene where, let me find it. Nick says, I was standing beside his bed and he was sitting up between the sheets, clad in underwear with a great portfolio in his hand. Like, that reads as nothing but, like, afterwards of them in bed together.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, like, post-coital almost. But also, like, there's a scene where they're talking to each other and, like, they're in an elevator and, like, there's this whole phallic pun about keeping their hands off the lever in the elevator. There's a lot of indication of Nick as being, if not in a relationship with Gatsby, certainly enamored with him.
Well, didn't F. Scott Fitzgerald one time describe someone as, like, his lips were dangerous and he opened his mouth and he was irresistible or something like that? Mm-hmm. He was describing a gentleman like that.
Yeah, he, like, it's almost implied that Nick goes home from the first Gatsby party with a man.
Yeah. But Nick going home from the first Gatsby party, they do have this whole thing about car negligence and someone, like, who drives into a ditch. Mm-hmm. And this is before we have the drunk driving laws of the nation, because no one's supposed to be drinking at this time. Because of prohibition.
Yeah.
So, vehicular negligence is a big thing in this novel. And then, so he goes home from his first Gatsby party, and he's, like, fascinated, and then he forms this friendship with Gatsby. They go out on the boat, and Gatsby is like, I want you to arrange a meeting between Daisy and I. Daisy Buchanan. And, I know a lot of people are like, oh, Gatsby and Daisy they're two people who are one of the greatest couples of all time, and personally, I don't get it.
Well, that's because of a couple of things. First off, Daisy's main character trait is complacency.
Yeah.
As long as the situation she's in is comfortable enough, it doesn't even have to be comfortable, it just has to be mildly satisfactory. She will not do anything to change her situation.
No, she won't.
It's even if, like, Tom doesn't love her.
No.
Tom is having an affair. Tom is abusive to her.
She doesn't love Tom either.
And she doesn't love him. But she has a kid with him.
Yeah.
He pays her bills. So it's easier to just stay in
with
that
Tom
than to try and find something better for herself. I'm not even necessarily saying Gatsby. I'm just saying try to find something better for herself.
No.
And, like, part of this is the early 20th century, like, concept of how women interact with society. Like, a woman was not an individual who could make her own choices and move about society without a man. However, Daisy's reticence goes above and beyond that to a certain level of just, like, casual negligence for her own happiness. Like,
I don't really feel for Daisy as a character. I don't feel for her. I don't think she deserves anything good in life.
A lot of sympathy for Gatsby. But it's hard to feel much sympathy for Daisy because she doesn't even try to make her life better.
And see, it's like...
And she strings Gatsby along.
She really does. And I don't see why a lot of people are like, oh, Daisy and Gatsby, greatest couple of all time. I'm like, no!
Here's an interesting fact about Daisy Buchanan. Here's an interesting fact about Daisy Buchanan. She is based heavily off of Fitzgerald's own wife, Zelda.
I saw that Amazon TV series about that.
Zelda Fitzgerald was a woman of many impulsive whims, of alcoholism, and of mental health problems. There's suggestions that she could have been anything from bipolar to schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Depending on modern context. She was not well. She was not happy.
No.
She was prone to flights of fancy and mania. Fitzgerald loved her desperately anyway, and their relationship was full of violent ups and downs of happiness and hatred, from what I understand. And a lot of Daisy's characterization is based off of his wife Zelda.
See, I feel like Daisy, the whole novel, very much just disassociates from everyone and everything.
That's a good word. It's a good word for it. She just almost like removes herself mentally. Like her body is present, but emotionally and mentally, she's not there.
She's a very hard character to connect to, and I don't feel any sympathy or connection to her.
Sometimes I wonder if it's just that she doesn't feel like she has any power to change her own situation, and so the next best thing she can do is just mentally step away from it. In which case, I do find that very relatable, because if you don't feel like there's anything you can do, sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for yourself is just disassociate from it. Like, I mean, there are scenes where I feel like she's not even there. Like, she's in the room and she's describing
being there. Yeah, but
she's
not there.
But she's not there.
She's not there. The most there we see her is when she's with Gatsby.
And even then, she's not willing to change things.
No, she's not.
She knows that she is at a better place. And this gets really complicated because you talk about, like,
girl, fight for your happiness.
Well, but you talk about, like, is anyone owed any one thing? You know, there are so many narratives that picture a man who, like, is nice to a woman, and so she ends up with him because that's what he deserves. And, like, we, as modern readers, know that's not how things should go.
No, I'm not saying she should end up with Gatsby because Gatsby has pined after her. Gatsby has pined after Daisy. You discover Gatsby has pined after Daisy since their almost childhood. Mm-hmm. Like, they were teenagers together. She was his first love, and he was like, I'm going to go get my fortune and come back for you. And while he was off getting his fortune, pretty much, she married Tom because Tom was there. Mm-hmm. And he's always like, well, I never felt like I really deserved Daisy, but I've always loved her. And Gatsby very much lives in that past. He lives in the past where he and Daisy were together, and he really cannot. Everything he has done has been to reclaim that past, and you can't do that. That's not healthy.
Well, the thing about Gatsby is every choice he has made in his life since he met Daisy is constructed to bring her back into his life. He throws these expensive, lavish parties because he's hoping that she'll come over for one of them. He has all of this money. He's like nouveau rich.
Yeah.
Because he has gotten this money. And he didn't get the money from an inheritance.
No.
Or from working really hard. He's a bootlegger. He got all of his money by illegally selling alcohol. And he did it not because he wanted to be rich, but because he only thought Daisy would be interested in him if he had money.
So do you think that is love, or do you think that is obsession?
And they do start an affair.
They do. They have an affair. But I think...
And Nick is the only one bearing witness to all this. And
yeah.
It's interesting to me, especially from the perspective of Nick being queer. He even describes himself as disgusted by Myrtle at one point in her, like, artificial happiness. And Daisy, his cousin, he is almost embarrassed for her and how she's carrying on in a public sphere. And I think part of it is, social mores of the day, but I think part of it is Nick is jealous that she is getting the majority of Gatsby's attention.
See, that makes more sense to me, thinking about how the novel, but
I really think everyone, like, I know that I'm one of those queers who just, like, finds queer content and everything, but, like, the Gatsby-Nick connection has been there since the book was written.
Yeah.
Like, people have been talking about it since 1925, and, like, rereading the novel with the context of Nick as an unreliable queer narrator who's in love with Gatsby makes for a much more interesting novel.
Yeah, and see, I'm straight, and I see it.
If a straight person didn't see it. My point is, Nick is not a reliable narrator.
No.
And so his portrayal of how Gatsby and Daisy's affair goes on may not be accurate, but even so, it's very, like, bloodless. It's very, like, lacking in passion. Like, Gatsby's sort of got the the puppy dog golden retriever follow her
Yeah.
around thing going. But Daisy's just kind of like,
That's why I don't
she's
get.
explicitly said to be in love with him, but she's not like writing sonnets to the skies or anything. You know?
To be in love, you don't need to write sonnets to the skies, but I just don't. The way it's described, I don't
bloodless.
see.
It's bloodless.
Yeah, it's bloodless. There's no passion. There's no nothing, and it's like Gatsby is just like he's so taken with Daisy, and he loves her with everything.
I think
everything
Gatsby
he's ever done is for her.
Loves the idea of Daisy more than he loves the person.
Agreed. I think he loves the idea of Daisy more than he loves the actual person.
I'm just picturing
And I
my
think
like
Daisy,
fucking high school like literature
and I
teachers
think
listening to this podcast and being like, "This is what I was trying to tell you 10 years ago."
And I think Daisy is just the pinnacle representation of his perfect past that he is trying to get back to. I feel like Gatsby is just a man who is living in the past and he wants to go back to that one summer of love where he thought everything was perfect and he can't get back
haven't
there.
We all done that though? Like maybe we haven't necessarily pursued a person because we knew that, or because we felt like they were part of it. But haven't we all got like a specific past moment in our lives that we're like, that was so easy and so nice. If I could just get back to that, life would be easier. And then maybe even we've gotten to that point where we're like, wow, it's not easier. I forgot all the negative parts of this because I was living in this like rose-colored haze of what it would be like to go back to it. You know, I think everybody's got that. I think that's eminently relatable.
Everybody wants that, but Gatsby pursues it with almost an obsession.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying, but I'm saying like, I mean, I think back and I'm like, you know, if I had been in this specific part of my life where I felt a certain way, and I
what was that?
Sorry. If I look back at my life and I look back at certain parts of my life, and I'm like, if I could do that again, or if I could live in that moment, life would be so much easier.
Well, we all have those.
We all have those moments.
But
the difference is that Gatsby like pursues it obsessively to the point where it causes him nothing but heartache and pain.
And that's why it's not healthy to kind of do that.
No, and that's kind of the point of the book.
And that's like the green light across the bay is it's representative of Daisy and the past and the thing he can never get back.
Yeah, no, it's and Gatsby's trying so hard to retain this memory of what he remembers of being happy. And suggesting that he's not happy now, and like he throws these lavish parties, and he's super rich, and he has many friends.
He doesn't enjoy them,
and he doesn't enjoy any of it.
It's kind of like having the pool that he never uses. He's worked so hard for all of this, and he doesn't take advantage of it because he is too busy pining over something that can't ever be again.
And so even whenever they get together, Daisy and Gatsby, yes, it's not what he dreamed it would be. And he even confides to Nick at one point. He's like, "This isn't." It's not right yet, but he's like, she just needs to leave her husband.
Yeah.
He's like, this doesn't feel right. She just needs to leave her husband. And Nick's kind of like, it doesn't feel right because she's never been what you built her up to be in your memory.
Exactly. And so then it's like, I know a couple podcasts ago, we always did I think it was the Sense and Sensibility podcast. It's like, have you ever pined for someone and then got them?
Then what?
Yeah. Then what? I know we had talked about then what earlier today, but that's for later. But, you know, it's like sometimes it's like the pining works out, and then sometimes the pining is like you built this person up to be a wonderful idea, and then you actually get the actual person, and they don't measure up to the idea, and Daisy doesn't measure up. And so he's like, she just needs to leave her husband, and so...
That wouldn't have made it better.
One day in New York, they have this big old confrontation.
Tom shows up at the Plaza Hotel.
Yes.
And he tells Daisy that Gatsby is a bootlegger and that he's involved in all these other illegal activities, but none of his money is from inheritance, that he's one of the nouveau riche, and that he is garbage and that he is never going to be what she needs him to be.
Gatsby throws in his face, he's like, but she loves me, she told me she loved me, and she never loved you. Daisy, tell him you never loved him. And Daisy is like, I might have loved him at some point, like when we got married, I loved him. And so it's not enough for Gatsby that Daisy loves him now. he needs Daisy to have never loved Tom, because he needs to erase Tom and their daughter from Daisy's narrative.
So Tom sends Gatsby, and this is the part that fucks me up.
Yeah.
Tom says she decides that she's going to stay with Tom. She's in a marriage. She has a kid. There's money on the line. She decides she wants to stay in that marriage, and she tells Gatsby so at this big confrontation at the hotel. Gatsby is, of course, crushed by this.
He's devastated.
And Tom has to have the final say. So he's like, "Why don't you take her back to East Egg? Why don't you drive her home? Because you can't do anything to her because she chose me." And so Daisy and Gatsby leave together in Gatsby's yellow car, as per Tom's instruction. Yeah. That's what kills me, is that, like, Tom couldn't just let it go. He couldn't just load his wife into his car and go home. He had to, like, add insult to injury by making Gatsby take her home.
Tom is a dick.
Yeah, Tom's
a
fucking asshole.
I don't like Tom. I don't like Daisy. I don't like Gatsby. I don't like Nick. I don't like any of the main characters of this novel. I don't like any of them.
I like Nick. And I don't like Gatsby, but I feel for Gatsby.
I understand Nick. I don't like Nick.
Anyway, so Gatsby and Daisy head home together in Gatsby's yellow car. And on the way home, the car strikes and kills Myrtle Wilson,
who was rushing out to meet someone in the car because previously Tom was driving Gatsby's car.
And so she's rushing out to meet who she thinks is Tom.
Her lover, and
she's hit by the car and dies pretty much instantly.
And so when they find out about it, Myrtle Wilson's husband, George, is convinced that Tom is the one who struck his wife. And so when Tom shows up, because Tom has said, "I will sell you this car," because Myrtle Wilson's husband is like, "I'm taking you away from here," because Myrtle Wilson's husband found out that day that Myrtle was having an affair. He does not know with who. He does not know it's Tom.
Right. He doesn't assume it's Tom that was driving the car. He assumes it was Myrtle's lover.
Yeah.
He doesn't know who Myrtle's lover is, but he's like, Myrtle's lover was the one driving the car.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tom is the one who kind of implicates Gatsby as Myrtle's lover and the one who hit her with the car.
Even though Tom is the one who did it. But Gatsby
was not driving the car.
Daisy was
driving the car.
Daisy was driving the car. And she
said the only person who knows that
is Gatsby and Nick.
Gatsby tells Nick that Daisy was driving the car. And Nick is freaking out, and he's like, well, George Wilson is really angry, and Gatsby's like, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to go and relax for once in my life. Everything has gone horribly sideways. I'm not getting what I want. Everything is terrible. I can't figure out a way to make Daisy love me and stay with me. So I'm just going to go out and float in my pool.
On the last day of summer.
On the last day of summer and not think about any of this.
Yeah.
Because it has nothing to do with me.
We'll drain the pool tomorrow.
And George, misunderstanding the situation, assuming that Gatsby not only is the one who was driving the car and killed Myrtle, but also assuming that Gatsby is the one who was having an affair with Myrtle, shows up, shoots Gatsby in the pool, and then kills himself.
Yes. So Gatsby is dead. Daisy stays with Tom. We'll move back to Chicago. Nick is left to arrange Gatsby's funeral.
And that's the other thing, that again, going back to this whole concept of Nick being the queer character here, is like,
I don't doubt that Nick has
been Gatsby's friend for like less than 3 weeks at this point. He barely knows the man, and yet he arranges a funeral for him, and it is a depressingly small funeral.
It is.
They talk about Gatsby's funeral.
And his father.
They talk about Gatsby's funeral, and they compare it directly to Gatsby's parties.
Yes. His parties where everyone was there and they had no problem bad-mouthing Gatsby while they were drunk on his liquor.
Yeah, so it's that kind of like that fair weather friends concept.
Yeah, and
they were there for Gatsby when he was alive and he was footing their alcohol bill.
Yeah.
But whenever he's been murdered unjustly.
Yes, because Tom was the one who was like, oh yeah, this is the guy who it is, because Tom was trying to duck under the bullet. Tom is directly responsible for.
You blame Tom?
Well, I don't know.
I blame Daisy.
I blame Tom and Daisy.
The thing is, Daisy is the one who killed Myrtle.
Daisy is the one who killed Myrtle.
Unequivocally.
It is Daisy's fault Myrtle is dead. It is Tom's fault for purposely misdirecting George. I'm not saying it is Tom's fault that Gatsby is dead because he couldn't know that George was going to go do that.
So, here's an interesting question.
Not cool.
Here's an interesting conundrum. Assuming that George had known it was Daisy who killed Myrtle. And assuming that, he knew that Daisy's husband was the one having an affair with Myrtle, Daisy would have been the one at the end of that bullet. So, from the perspective of Gatsby, who's not happy with their affair, but who does love Daisy more than anything in the world, isn't it better from Gatsby's perspective that he is shot than Daisy? Wouldn't Gatsby rather die?
Gatsby would rather die
than let
to
Daisy
get
shot?
He would.
And that's
Gatsby would rather die to protect Daisy, and that is the tragedy of it because Daisy would not take a bullet for him. That's why when everybody's like, oh, Daisy and Gatsby are one of the best couples of the century, I'm like, no, they're not. It is a one-sided love.
I think Daisy loved Gatsby. I don't think that overrode her selfishness. But I do think she loved Gatsby. I don't think she loved anyone more than she loved her own security.
I don't think Daisy is capable of love.
At all?
At all. I don't think she loves Tom. I don't think she loves Gatsby. I don't think she loves her daughter.
You don't think she loves her daughter?
I don't. And I also don't think she gives a shit about Nick, who is family to her. I think Daisy is a selfish creature, and that she doesn't really ever truly care about anybody. She only sees people and how they can benefit her. That's probably why she married Tom, is she loved the sense of security he could give her. Again, she loved the idea of Tom. She didn't actually love Tom. Same thing with Gatsby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Daisy is capable of love. At all.
Interesting.
Daisy seems like a very wooden character to me. That is one of the biggest problems I have with this novel, is Jordan is not a likable character.
Jordan is incredibly unlikable.
Jordan is incredibly unlikable. I don't like anything about her, and she doesn't learn anything. Nick, I understand, but I don't like him, and he doesn't learn anything. Gatsby is living in the past, and he doesn't learn anything. Daisy is selfish and wooden and doesn't care about anybody and doesn't learn anything from this experience.
Does anybody?
Nobody
the
learns
only person
anything.
who learns anything is Nick. I would argue that Nick learned something because Nick comes into the novel as a kind of interesting because he was in World War I, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But he comes into the novel as kind of an optimist.
Yeah.
He has a really positive outlook on the world. And then between meeting and dating Jordan, between meeting and doing whatever he does with Gatsby, and then watching Gatsby get murdered for something he didn't do.
Yeah.
Gatsby, who is an idiot, who maybe made some bad choices, but has never done anything wrong within the circumstances of this.
The only person who changes even a little bit is Nick, and it's in a downward spiral.
Yeah, he just becomes less of an optimist. He becomes more discouraged, more of a bleak outlook on the world.
Yeah, I mean, this novel is definitely a tragedy.
Tom and Daisy are completely unaffected by what happens to Gatsby. They leave town.
Tom and Daisy are completely unaffected by the events of this novel, and Daisy has killed someone. And she doesn't feel a goddamn thing.
She doesn't feel any guilt. She doesn't face any repercussions.
And Tom is just going to continue his life of having affairs and abusing women.
And being a white supremacist, actually.
Yes, he is a white supremacist.
Fun detail that we kind of skipped over earlier.
Tom's
a white supremacist.
He's so racist, and that is explained in the novel. And even Nick is like, well, I don't know about that. But that's what they talk about, is his aversion to the other. Is the most polite way I can think of putting it. But Tom's definitely a racist.
I think the reason this novel resonates so strongly with people is because we've all wanted something we couldn't have.
Yeah.
And we've all done stupid things to get something that maybe wasn't good for us.
Daisy is Gatsby's white whale.
And that's what that quote was. The quote, they talk about him standing on his dock and looking at the green light across the bay. And, like, to him, that green light was the symbolism of everything he wanted, of the relationship with Daisy, of, Gatsby was never satisfied with his life. He had all this money. He had all the success. Yeah, it was all illegally gained, but he had all of this, and he was not happy. He was not satisfied. And he just thought that if he could get this one specific thing,
he'd be happy.
He would be happy. And he stands out on his dock, and he looks at this green light, and he imagines the life for himself that he wants, where he's happy with this woman. And he never gets it.
No.
He never gets it. It's his entire goal. The only thing he's focused on since he met Daisy is trying to make this thing happen. And the best he gets is a brief affair, and then to be murdered for something that she did, for something the person that he imagined would make him happy did.
This pursuit destroys him.
It literally destroys him. And the only person affected is Nick, who, again, much more compelling from the read of him being in love with Gatsby. If Nick was just Gatsby's friend, this is tragic. If Nick was in love with Gatsby, to watch the man he loved perpetuate this cycle of destruction on himself, Nick is sitting here and looking at it as, this is the one thing I wanted. This is how I felt. And I've seen what that does to people. And so it is better to just not have something than it is to seek it out. Because otherwise you're going to destroy yourself. And that, it's kind of crushing that Nick, who comes into the story full of life and optimism, even after being a soldier in, like, the most horrific war of all time, comes in with all this life and optimism and is crushed to see the person that he cares about or loves, depending on your interpretation, absolutely destroyed by this attempt to find happiness. It's absolutely crushing.
Then do you think this novel is like, don't try and find happiness, it will destroy you?
I don't think that's what it's saying. I think what it's saying is,
I feel like this novel is heavily focused on the people who are destroyed are the people who try to look in the past.
Right. I think that's what it's saying. I think what it's saying is happiness is a complicated concept. And your happiness needs to be based in the here and now.
It really does.
If you're going to be happy, it needs to be with your current situation. You can't constantly be like, well, after I have this promotion, or after I have this raise, or after I buy this new house, or after I have this wedding, I'll be happy. Because none of those things are what's going to be making you happy. Like, there's a certain, as cliche as it said, there's a certain element of the only person that can make you happy is you.
That's true. And I mean, you can't, I don't know if I should blame Gatsby for laying all his hopes on Daisy, but Daisy is not a good person to lay your hopes on.
I would suggest what the novel is saying is that you should never lay your hopes on any other person.
No, you shouldn't.
There's nothing wrong with love and romance, and there's nothing wrong with deriving joy from those things. But your happiness shouldn't ever be dependent upon another person.
No, your happiness should
because you can only control yourself, and you don't know what another person is going to do. And so to depend your happiness on someone else means put yourself at risk of a heartbreak, or worse, total destruction.
Yeah.
And I think Gatsby learned that. I think Nick learns that. Although for Gatsby, it's too late.
I was going to say, does Gatsby really learn that?
Gatsby's 30-some years old. He's young. He's young and unhappy, and because of a couple of stupid mistakes, he's dead.
And stupid mistakes that were not committed by him. All of them were Tom's.
I don't think Gatsby should have started an affair with a married woman. I don't think Gatsby
No.
should have made his entire life's goal to get the attention of one person who was technically unavailable.
Yeah.
But other than that, Gatsby didn't really do anything wrong.
Gatsby didn't. He really didn't. I mean, bootlegging, but it's
the main thing that Gatsby did wrong was depend on another person for his happiness.
Yeah. And he lived so much in the past that he couldn't enjoy what he had now.
Because,
his father, even in the novel, his father was so proud of him and everything he had accomplished.
Right.
And the house he had. And even Nick discovered that Gatsby's father loved his son for the image his son put out. He didn't love his son for who he was.
I think the critical thing to understand here is that
for all the parties he threw, Gatsby was a very lonely man.
Yeah, he was. And I think the thing to understand here, I think the thing that Gatsby never learned is that you're the only person who has any control of your own destiny. And Gatsby was like, well, if I can just make X, Y, and Z happen, then I will have what I need. But the thing is, even if Gatsby had gotten Daisy's attention, gotten her to love him, gotten her to leave her husband for him, they would have been together and he would have still felt dissatisfied because he was relying on her to provide him his happiness. And we're all human and we're all fallible. Like,
yeah, and Daisy, that's not fair to Gatsby, and that's not fair to Daisy.
Daisy can be pleasant and gregarious and beautiful to Gatsby one day, but the next day maybe she's in a bad mood and she's grumpy and she doesn't, and like they say hurtful things to each other. Like, you can't rely on someone else for your happiness because you can't control anybody's actions but your own. And so when someone acts in a way that you don't like or you don't find favorable, you can't blame them for diminishing your happiness because it's not their responsibility to keep you happy.
No,
like this is not me saying that people should not treat each other well, or people should be like, oh, well, that doesn't make me happy, so I'm not going to do it. Like, I still believe in altruism, and I still believe in like making choices that help the good of society rather than just yourself. But the natural human condition is inherently selfish, and you have to recognize that you're responsible for your own choices and no one else's.
People are not against you. People are for themselves.
Exactly, and it's not the same thing.
No, it's not.
And I feel like Gatsby doesn't understand that.
No.
And he never really gets a chance to learn that.
No, he never really gets a chance to learn that because he's shot by a man who thinks that Gatsby is having an affair with his wife, even though he isn't, because the man who is having the affair with his wife is like, oh yeah, it's this guy because I want him out of the way because he's having an affair with my wife.
I want to have no personal responsibility for my own actions.
Yeah.
Really, in the course of the novel,
this indulgence.
Who among the main characters ever takes responsibility for their own actions?
None of them do. This level of indulgence that is inherent in this high society that is portrayed is ridiculous.
Which is
because
interesting.
Nobody takes any responsibility for anything.
It's interesting because Fitzgerald was a young man during the height of the Roaring '20s and the decadence of that era. So it almost comes across as a critique of society as a whole, of people refusing to acknowledge each other and refusing to be altruistic and only being focused on themselves. It almost comes across as a criticism from him of American society in general and how everyone is so wrapped up in their own personal lives that they don't look out for each other.
I believe that was the intention.
Mm-hmm.
Even so, it's like
Fitzgerald comes out of the 1920s very disillusioned.
Yes.
And very unimpressed with the decadence of the era.
Do you know if Fitzgerald served World War I?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
No, this book it's definitely a tragedy, and a lot of the reason I had a hard time with this book is because I could not relate to any of the characters. Because none of them were any kind of empathic.
No.
They didn't care about anybody else except themselves, Daisy included. And, everybody is like, oh, Daisy and Gatsby, they're a great couple. I'm like, I don't see it. Because Daisy is selfish. And Gatsby sacrificed everything for her, and that's a one-sided relationship. And that's not a great relationship to have.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom was abusive, and I'm like, there was not one good relationship in this novel. Even Nick and Gatsby.
Yeah.
Was not.
Because Nick just indulges all of Gatsby's flights of fancy.
Because he cared about him too much.
Mm-hmm.
So none of the relationships in this book are healthy.
Scott Fitzgerald was not a military man, but his father was.
Okay.
Wait.
I love how there's a whole.
No,
article.
He was.
He was.
Fitzgerald was commissioned a second lieutenant in the infantry and assigned to Camp Sheridan outside Montgomery, Alabama, which is where he met Zelda.
So good Southern heiress. Just
the
like Daisy
war
was.
ended in 1918 before Fitzgerald was ever deployed. Upon discharge, he moved to New York City, hoping to launch a career in advertising and persuade Zelda to marry him.
So this novel is pretty much his and Zelda's relationship. Gatsby
a lot of
and
it
Daisy.
Is. Although his first love, what was her name? Gertrude something maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Ginevra King. She was his inspiration for a lot of things. For like Isabelle Bourget and The Set of Paradise, and Emery Blaine. Their relationship, and a little bit off Daisy, but a lot of Daisy's also Zelda. But yeah, no, like same concept as these characters indulging each other in what they want to believe. And I think Nick is the most interesting character.
Nick is definitely the most interesting character.
He's the narrator. He's the one who follows everything happening. He's not reliable.
No.
He is blinded by his affection or love for Gatsby, depending on your interpretation of the text.
Yes.
And I kind of wonder if Nick hadn't been more assertive, if Gatsby would have lived.
Nick was exceptionally complacent.
If Nick had said something, you can't continue on like this with Zelda, or excuse me, with Daisy.
Yeah.
You can't do this, or like, she's not going to leave her husband for you. If he had tried to talk sense in Gatsby, would Gatsby have survived? I don't know.
Or would Gatsby have gotten mad and cut Nick out of his life?
But the thing about this that's so ugly is that because Gatsby died, especially if you're reading it from a queer context where Nick was in love with Gatsby, now Nick has been forced into this position of obsessively living in the past. Well, what would have happened if I had behaved differently?
Yeah.
How would things change if I had said something? Would Gatsby still be alive? Would Daisy and Tom still? What would have happened if I had?
Yeah, because
if I had acted in any way other than to just indulge Gatsby.
Because after Gatsby dies, Nick breaks up with Jordan, and she's upset about it. But he's like, I don't get over it, because he even makes a point where he's like, there are very few single men who I can hang out with now, because he's like, this was on my, because isn't like Daisy hits Myrtle on his 30th birthday. And so back then, it's like, oh, we're all hat now, boy.
Yeah.
Like, I told you about did I tell you about my great grandmother where she was considered an old maid at 22?
I'm 29 next week, or by this point I will already be 29.
Yeah, you're 29.
I'm 29.
You're 29.
I'm old. I'm an old maid. I'm unmarried at 29.
It's not that bad. 29 is not that bad.
But I'm married at 29. I'm an old maid.
You're kind of married in like common law.
At any rate.
I'd rather not.
At any rate, Nick is the only one who has any kind of growth. And even his growth is kind of suggested to be that negative. He's going to be living in the past. He's going to be obsessing over how he could have done things differently.
Which I feel like in that situation, if you have somebody who you really loved and cared about died, you're always going to question that. Was there something I could have done? Especially when it's like that with George, where George is like, oh, Gatsby is having an affair with my wife, and shoots him.
Yeah.
It's like, and even though Nick knows that Tom was the one who was having the affair.
Nick's like, if I could have talked to George, would
Yeah.
he
have gone after Gatsby? Or
if I could have told Gatsby to stop the affair with Daisy, would there have even been a car accident to kill Myrtle? Like,
if I had told George that Daisy was the one that hit Myrtle and it was an accident, and she was driving Gatsby's car, and the person that Myrtle was having an affair with was Tom, and she was upset about it, and that's why Myrtle was running outside, was because she thought this was Tom's car. Because Tom was being a dick and is like, this is my car and I'll sell it to you. Which, by the way, how big of a dick do you have to be to agree to sell somebody else's car?
Tom is a punk ass bitch.
Tom is a terrible, terrible, terrible person.
That's the excruciating thing to me. That's the hardest part. Is that someone is awful with Tom. And honestly, as Daisy,
yeah, Daisy's awful, Tom is awful.
Make horrible choices. Their behavior is absolutely repugnant, and they get off.
There's no accountability for this.
And yet, Gatsby's dead, and Nick is left with this horrible, gaping uncertainty of if he could have done anything to make it better. But Tom and Daisy are fucking off to what, Kentucky or something?
Chicago.
They're going back to Chicago. And no repercussion at all for their behavior.
No, not whatsoever. So, what kind of bottle rating do you give the Great Gatsby?
I would give Gatsby 3.5 bottles.
3.5? You like it that much?
I love this story. It's bleak and it's sad, but there's something very human about it. I don't find the characters necessarily relatable, but I do find their insecurities and uncertainties understandable to a certain degree. And Scott Fitzgerald's descriptions of New York and like the lavish party lifestyle as compared to like the slums in the Valley of Ashes are so visually stunning. Like, I mean, I can picture it without even trying. Like, there's no effort put into picturing it. It's just quintessential to me. So, yeah, 2.5.
I would probably give it a 2.5 because there's a lot about this book that I really disliked. Mm-hmm. I dislike the story. I dislike the characterization. I was bored. Listening to this book. I was bored.
Who was reading it?
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh, right, you said that.
Yeah. And I was bored. There was nothing, I did not feel invested in this story at all. But I finished it. But the reason
when did you read it the first time?
This was the first time.
You didn't read it in high school?
No, I didn't read it in high school. This is the first time I ever read it.
I read it for the first time in 9th grade. 9th grade? I think it was 9th grade. 9th or 10th grade. Mm-hmm. So as a teenager, with a perfectly good understanding of what it is you can have. So to me, and Nick as a character was really, at that point I wouldn't have sat down and been like, Nick Carraway from The Great Gatsby is gay. But I would have been like, Nick Carraway from The Great Gatsby is
See, now that you've said that, I'm like, oh, I see it.
Reading it as a 15, 16-year-old and seeing Nick just like not feeling like he connect with people on a real level, mm-hmm. and then finally finding Gatsby and like connecting with him, and then like not doing anything when all this shit goes down, and then Gatsby dies, and he's just sitting there like, is it my fault that this happened? I don't know. There was something infinitely relatable about Nick, and like that was well before I had any concept of there being any kind of academia discussing his queerness.
Yeah, I could not relate to Nick. I couldn't relate to anybody in this novel. I didn't feel invested in the story, but the reason I gave it as high rating as I did is because the writing is absolutely beautiful, stunning.
Fitzgerald
love the writing.
A fantastic writer.
The imagery is beautiful and perfect.
The colors. He describes colors
are stunning, like Gatsby's pink suit.
Gatsby's pink suit, the green light, the blue eyes on the billboard, when everything else is just black and gray and white.
This is just
the yellow car.
The imagery is just stunning in this novel.
And
it's fantastic.
I've seen several different film adaptations of The Great Gatsby. And the Baz Luhrmann version, came out in 2013 with Leonardo DiCaprio in the leading role, has a lot wrong with it in consideration to the novel and the source context. But the visual of like the roaring 20s and the parties and the champagne bottles popping and the eyes overlooking the Valley of Ashes, they got that just like perfect. Baz Luhrmann is very visual as a director, and that was one thing that I really appreciated from those films.
Yeah, so that, what'd you say, 3.5, and I gave it a 2.5? That's an average of 3.
Pretty damn good.
Yeah.
3 bottles of bathtub moonshine.
Woo!
Thank you, Prohibition.
Which, by the way, you know the U.S. government poisons certain moonshines to keep people from drinking, right?
Okay, I can't do this with you right now. I cannot do this crazy-ass conspiracy theory with you right now.
It's not a conspiracy theory. It actually happened. They released the documents.
Please. Please.
We'll cut this out.
Yeah, probably that'll be the intro, actually. Our intro was weak at best, but that was pretty good. Yeah. 10 out of 10. Would read again. I love
3 out of 5.
Well, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Whatever. I'm talking about, I'm talking about the quintessential, the 1920s, the flappers, the roaring 20s.
I love the 1920s.
The aesthetic.
I love the aesthetic. I don't like the whole lack of women's rights.
Do you think that we, as a country, are in a period of prosperity comparable to the 1920s with the decadent lifestyles and the hedonism and the drinking, and that we're about to crash into a new depression?
Well, I feel like we're about to crash into something.
I'll drink to that.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episodes of This Is Lit, hit up our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and of course our website, litliteraturepodcast.com. In the meantime, check out other podcasts that we like.
Astonishing Legends. Radio Free
Puppets. And of course, Welcome to Night Vale.
That I write for. I don't write for Welcome to Night Vale, but Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner. If you feel like it. Listen to our podcast. Hashtag listen to our podcast.
We love you all. We hope you have a wonderful New Year.
Happy New Year. May 2019 be more prosperous than 2018 was.
And may you not get hit by any yellow cars.
Amen to that, sister.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. For more information, visit us at litliteraturepodcast.com or check out our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And remember, too much work and no vacation deserves at least a small libation.
Cheers!